Patrick Radden Keefe, welcome to 7:30.
It's good to be with you.
Who was Zac Brettler and what happened to him?
Zac Brettler was a boy in London who was born in the year 2000, sort of a child of this millennium. He grew up in a loving, comfortable, upper middle class family. They lived in a nice flat in central London. And he turned out to be a fabulist. He was a boy with a very active imagination and ability to kind of do voices and impersonations, and ended up pretending that he was someone else altogether. He pretended that he was the son of a Russian oligarch, unbeknownst to his parents, and befriended certain people who were older and unscrupulous and ended up dead. He died in 2019.
What drew him into that world of the uber-wealthy Russian oligarchs and the circles that move out from them?
Well, I think Zac came of age in an era in which London was changing quite dramatically, and the city was becoming a real bastion of conspicuous consumption, of the kind of global plutocracy, sort of a destination for money and people who had it. And if you've been to London during this time, you've seen the place has kind of changed. The old industrial city of the past has been supplanted by a kind of glittering glass and steel metropolis. And there's a lot of blingy consumption, right, in advertising that's everywhere you see, and supercars and luxury real estate. And Zac grew up kind of as an adolescent, I think, very taken with that and very taken with the kind of swaggering hustle culture that is hardly unique to London, but very, very pronounced there in this day and age, and got to know some of the children of oligarchs, real Russian oligarchs, and was kind of taken with the lifestyle that they lived and wanted some of that for himself.
I mean, it should be remarkable in this story that those people he came into contact with, you know, starting with the oligarchs, but they're offsiders, and then some of the criminal underclass that feature in the story in those concentric circles. It should be amazing that they didn't check up on the true identity of this boy. How do you explain that?
It's one of the things in my reporting that I was very curious about, is that you have this child, really 18 years old when he starts telling this lie, who starts moving around adult London, claiming that he is not Zac Brettler, nice Jewish boy, middle-class kid, goes to private school and lives in Maida Vale, but Zac Ismailov, the heir to an oligarch fortune. And he meets these grown-ups and they take it on face value. You know, when you're a con artist, you want to kind of present a story that the mark wants to believe. And some of it was also, as one of them explained to me, he said, you know, the thing about the truly wealthy is that they stay off the internet. Because my big question was, why didn't you just Google him? And the answer was that people who are really wealthy and connected go to some pains to not be so findable on the internet. So if you looked him up and you couldn't find him, then there's your answer.
There's an indication that he is truly wealthy. Tell me about his parents, Matthew and Rochelle Brettler. Do you think that when they decided to talk to you after Zac's death, that there was a part of them that did think you might have the capacity to find out what really happened to him when he fell, jumped, or was pushed off that balcony?
Yeah, people talk to journalists for lots of reasons. And in this case, this was a family that had been very private and had not gone public about Zac's death. I met them by chance through a family friend. And one thing that I had to talk about with them when we first met was, I said, I'd love to tell this story. I want you to entrust the story to me, to open up this very tragic chapter of your lives to me. But don't do it out of some unspoken expectation that if you do, I will bring you the accountability that the authorities have failed to do, that I will be able to crack the case in a way that the cops have not. And listen, I mean, I think they said that they understood that. I think they did understand it. Nevertheless, I went in and I investigated. I think there are some answers in this book that didn't exist before. And I think importantly, the family wanted a sense of accountability, if not legal accountability, a sense that the truth was kind of captured between two covers, both about some of the more nefarious characters in this story and also about the incompetence of the Metropolitan Police in London.
So beyond the story of the universe created by the influx of wealth to London, the oligarchs, and the criminal class that work with them. This story also morphs into a very painful realization for Zac's parents that you cannot entirely know nor mold a child. So how did that story emerge at the very beginning for you, or did you have to learn that along the way with the family?
Yeah, that took me by surprise. I mean, I had been interested before I ever met the family in the way in which London had kind of reinvented itself as a destination for global plutocrats and dodgy money. And so I was naturally kind of drawn to those themes. As I pushed into the book, I was thinking about the idea of reinvention in adolescence that many of us go through, the way in which individuals, some of them just normal people, some of them con artists, reinvent themselves, kind of put on a new mask, try on a new identity, much as London was reinventing itself. As I got further into it, it kind of hit me with the force of revelation that I was actually writing a book about parenthood and about parental love.
And of course, for them, the terrible thing is they're having to learn these new details about their son in the wake of his violent death. So not like most parents who have years to come to an understanding, but in profound grief.
I think that's right, and I think, you know, we talked a lot. I mean, this is a family I spent hundreds of hours talking to over several years, and one thing that we talked a lot about was the idea of adolescence as this phase in which, you know, there's an analogy that a friend of mine used, an older friend, a mentor of mine, who told me when my own children got into adolescence, he said, you have to think of them as on a kind of an orbit, and there's a period of time when they're on the dark side of the moon, but they're going to come back out the other side. They'll come back.
Great image.
It's a lovely line. And I think the challenge for the Brettlers is that Zac never came back. He never made it back around the other side. And so they've had to kind of reckon not just with the mystery of how he died, but really with the mystery of who he was in life.
Just on the subject of Instagram, it's not the cause of what happened to Zac. It's not the thing that drove him into the arms of unscrupulous people. But it is a vital feature in his life. There's one lovely moment where Rachel, the mother, recalls walking past his room and seeing the light of his phone. What is the role of the algorithm here in Zac's life, pulling him towards this other universe?
Yeah, I mean, the book is not a polemic. It's not an argument about screens and kids and what have you. But inescapably, I mean, Zac was born in 2000, and it's not just that he was a digital native. He was a social media native. This is somebody who grew up on Instagram. And I think that any of us who've spent time on an algorithmic program have had that experience where you're scrolling through with your fingertip and you hesitate for just a millisecond on something, and the algorithm registers your interest, and then it starts to feed you up more of whatever it is that you lingered on. And in Zac's case, that was supercars and luxury real estate. And I think even for an adult, it's a slightly destabilizing feeling to have some passing fancy be isolated upon and then kind of served up to you in great dollops by the program. Imagine being 13, 14, 15 years old, where your sense of the line separating reality from fantasy is already maybe a little bit fuzzy, and you're trying to figure out who you are and what you care about. I think the effect for Zac was of a kind of undertow. He was pulled deeper and deeper into his own preoccupations.
One of the things that accompanies your investigative rigor in this story, which is clear throughout, and the kind of layers of context that you put around his story, but there's also a skepticism that I've heard you talk about before. Where in your own makeup does that never-ending questioning skepticism come from?
Probably my mother, who is a retired professor of philosophy.
And Australian.
And Australian, from Melbourne, yeah. And big, important part of my life, somebody who is herself a writer. She's written more books than I have. And somebody who I still talk about my work with on a very regular basis. And she has a kind of natural skepticism, a sort of conversational skepticism where everything has to be sort of poked and prodded and turned around and examined from different angles. And that's something that, it became it was just sort of an abiding thing in my life, and something that I think very much informs the way I approach my work now.
Patrick Radden Keefe, thank you very much for joining us. Congratulations on the book. It is not a mere page-turner. It's a deeply rewarding experience, which I recommend to everyone who sees it sitting there in the bookshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.